Sean Xavier Alcalita for the next chapter of our Rizal course, which is the Noli Tangere in the context and also its content. And I will also include the continuing relevance of the novel today. So let's move to the next slide. So learning objectives. So at the end of this chapter, the student should be able to, number one, discuss the historical background and major elements of the Noli Tangere as a novel. And number two, appreciate the importance of Rizal as a thinker. And lastly, number three, relate the issues raised in the novel to the changing landscape of the contemporary world. For the vocabulary, so when you say a novel is a long-written story, most often about fictional events and characters. Setting, which is in the novel, refers to the context in which the events take place, covers geographical areas in particular periods of time. The plot, the flow of the narrative in the story. Censorship is the suppression of the release or publication of material deemed inappropriate, obscene, politically unacceptable, or a threat to security. Sociology is a social science dealing with the study of the development, structures, and functioning of the human society. Okay, so here's the symbol of the cover page of the Noli Tangere. So the cross, which is found in the topmost portion, refers to the sufferings. The pomelo blossoms and the laurel leaves represents the honor and fidelity. The woman, the silhouette of the Filipina, is Maria Clara. The burning torch refers to the rage and passion. Sunflowers referring to the Enlightenment. So here the bamboo stalks that were cut grow down but grew back is resilient. So the bamboo stalks that were cut down and grew back, it is also referring to Rizal, no? It's a green field while still green, and it sprouts again. Cut while it's still green, and it sprouts again. Okay, so a man in a cassock with a hairy feet, referring to the friars and the priests using religion in a dirty way. Okay, so the chains referring to the slavery, the whips are the cruelties, the helmet of the Guardia Civil are referring to the arrogance of those in authority. Okay, so the publication of the Noli Tangere. So as a sojourner in Europe, Rizal participated in the movement of the Ilustrados to utilize propaganda to campaign for reforms in the Philippines. Utilizing their intellectual prowess, the Ilustrados released various written outputs from the newsbits to feature articles and commentaries. They also produced creative outputs from satirical pieces to world-class paintings within the artistic and literary collection. Rizal's exemplary mastery of words was clearly evident in one of his most celebrated works in his first novel, the Noli Tangere. The idea of publishing a book was not alien to Rizal. In a meeting of the Ilustrados in 1884, he proposed to write a book project to be done collaboratively with his fellow writers. Unfortunately, the project did not materialize, so eventually, he decided to write a novel on his own. He started to work on the project in 1884 and completed it in 1887. So, Rizal finished the first half of the novel in Spain, supposedly in the other half in France, and then completed the draft in 1886. The novel was published the following year in Germany. Lack of funds delayed the book's publication until the fellow Ilustrado in the name of Dr. Maximo Viola, who lent him 300 pesos for the printing of the first 2,000 copies of the Noli Tangere. And by 1887, Rizal was already sending out copies of the Noli to his friends, and the book began to take flight. Okay, so the motivations behind writing the Noli. So the title Noli Tangere had a biblical reference to the Gospel of John, in which Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene and uttered these words, "Touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father." The choice of the title, according to Rizal, was fitting because he intended to write about the themes that were taboo in the Philippines for centuries, things that people dared not to touch. And according to his biographers, Rizal first planned to write his novel in French, considered to be the language of the intellectuals in Europe at the time. He, however, shifted to Spanish because he intended to reach out to his countrymen in the Philippines. So Rizal explained that I must wake from its slumber the spirit of my country. I must first propose to my countrymen an example with which they can struggle against their bad qualities. And afterwards, when they have reformed, many writers would rise up to present my country to proud Europe. So in the initial pages of the Noli, the dedication titled Ami Patria clearly articulated Rizal's purpose for writing the novel. So he says here, "To my motherland, in the annals of the human adversity, there is etched a cancer of a breed so malignant that the least contact exacerbates it and stirs in it the sharpest of pains. And thus, many times amidst modern cultures, I have wanted to evoke you, sometimes for memories of you, to keep me company, other times to compare you with other nations. Many times your beloved image appears to me afflicted with social cancer of similar malignancy, desiring your well-being, which is our own, and searching for the best cure. I will do with you as the ancients of the old, with their afflicted, expose them the steps of the temple, so that each one who would come to invoke the divine would propose a cure for them. And to this end, I will attempt to faithfully reproduce your condition without much ado. I will lift part of your shroud that conceals your illness, sacrificing to the truth everything, even in my own self-respect, for as your son, I also suffer in your defects and failings." So the project of writing the Noli, as stated, was geared towards exposing the ills of Philippine colonial society under Spain. Thus, through the passages within the Noli, readers also get glimpses of how Rizal saw his country. So the plot, no? The story of the Noli Tangere followed the life of Juan Crisostomo Ibarra after he returned to the Philippines from studying in Europe. The novel opened with Capitan Tiago preparing a homecoming gathering for the young Ilustrado. Throughout the pages of the novel, the characters could be seen navigating the complex realities of colonial Philippines. Ibarra was shown to be rekindling the links with his betrothed Maria Clara. But not everything was fine and dandy for Ibarra. Upon his return, he learned about the ills that plagued his town, as well as the abuses of the friars, to which his late father fell victim to. So Ibarra found an antagonist in Padre Damaso, the former curate of San Diego, who ordered that the corpse of his father be exhumed and reburied in the Chinese cemetery. Despite these personal travails, Ibarra persevered to fulfill the plan of building a school in San Diego, staying true to his belief that education was crucial for his nation's progress. So Ibarra almost got killed had it not for Elias, a boatman who saved him. Elias also previously cautioned Ibarra about his actions that could anger the friars. After the incident, Ibarra organized a luncheon or a dinner. So here, another confrontation occurred between Ibarra and Damaso, who attended the luncheon uninvited. In a fit of anger, Ibarra took a knife against Damaso's neck and threatened to slit his throat as he told everyone of the abuses committed by Damaso and the desecration he did to Ibarra's father. Maria Clara calmed Ibarra and prevented him from killing the friar. Damaso, in an act of revenge, persuaded Capitan Tiago, the father of Maria Clara, to not allow his daughter to marry Ibarra. So as turmoil and confusion engulfed the town, Maria Clara thought Ibarra had been killed. This caused her endless grief, so she asked to be confined in the nunnery lest she take on her life. It was later revealed that Ibarra was not dead, and that Elias was the one fatally shot. In the later passages, the dying Elias was waiting for Ibarra, but instead met and talked to the young Basilio. He instructed the orphan boy, his mother, whose mother, Sisa, who became insane looking for her young sons, had died, to find the treasure of Ibarra buried in the cemetery and use it to get an education. So he reminded Basilio to never lose hope, and if one day freedom and progress would come into his country, to not forget those who labored in the night. So within this general contour of the narrative, Rizal wove a complex story of subplots. Reading through the novel, different characters and their corresponding stories unfolded as told through the voice of an unseen narrator. Truly, the passages of the Noli reflected the lives of people living in the complicated world of colonial Philippines. So Noli, after its first publication, at present, Noli Tangere is considered by many as a landmark piece of literature. In his account of the literary history of the Philippines, a scholar or a Cebuana scholar in the name of Rizal Mujares even went to the extent of naming Rizal as the father of Filipino novel. As already discussed in the previous chapter, the themes of the novel revolve around societal issues experienced in the Philippines under the Spanish colonial rule. As such, the novel did not go unnoticed and became the subject of discussion and debate. So in the immediate months and years after its release in 1887, the Noli generated reactions and readers from readers, Filipinos and foreigners alike. Responses ranged from praise to outright ridicule. One sector that espoused utmost disdain for the novel was the Spanish clergy as well as some Spanish colonial officials. It is thus understandable that Spanish friars vehemently prohibited the circulation of the novel in 1887, when Fray Salvador Font, chair of Censorship Commission, outlawed the reading and possession of Rizal's novel. Many other friars assessed and judged the book as pernicious. They enjoined devout Catholics to not read the novel to avoid committing capital sins. Not only confined in the Philippines, critiques of the novel coming from Spanish officials and academics also circulated in Spain. One staunch critic of the novel was the Spanish academic Vicente Barrantes, who wrote several articles in Spanish newspapers ridiculing Rizal as the man of contradictions. Barantes lamented that Rizal's lambasting of the friars and the Spaniards was reflective of the author and telling more about the Filipinos. So as much as Rizal's critics came from various sectors, his novel also found ardent defenders among his peers, among his friends. Many of his colleagues in the propaganda movement praised this novel. One example is Marcelo H. del Pilar, who even wrote essays in response to the critics of the Noli. Rizal's friend Ferdinand Blumentritt, also an academic, also expressed support for the novel. So as the Noli stirred controversy in social circles in the 19th century Philippines, it is remarkable to realize that even beyond its time, the novel continued to be the subject of debate and discussion. In the immediate years after its publication, the Noli was translated into several languages. One of the earliest translations of the Noli was done in French. Many scholars posit that there were early attempts to translate the novel into German by Blumentritt, and even Tagalog by Rizal's brother Pasiano. But these plans never came to fruition. At the turn of the 20th century, during the American colonial period, several other translations and editions of the novel came out. Arguably, the most circulated versions were the English translations of Charles Derbyshire. By the 1930s, Rizal's Noli had several Spanish editions, translations into English, French, Japanese, and also into several languages in the Philippines, including Tagalog, Cebuano, Waray, Ilocos, and Bicol. So the very controversy that surrounded the passage of the Rizal Law indicated the relevance of the text in the 1950s and even in beyond. In academia, many scholars have also made it to the point to discuss the politics of translation and the nuances of the transforming the text in several forms. As Testa de Ocampo points out, as much as the novel is elevated in the highest echelons of the Philippine literary history, seldom do we find Filipinos reading it in original Spanish. Versions and translations of the Noli also did not go without scrutiny from the academics like Benedict Anderson, truly be it about its content, context, or the way it is read or used. The value of Rizal's novel is definitely felt in the Philippines. So the Noli and the study of the colonial society. So a remarkable aspect of Rizal's Noli lies in its text, which espoused the national heroes' articulations of a social scientific view of the 19th century Philippines he was describing. Sociologist Cid Farid Alatas even went as far as describing Rizal as probably the first systematic social thinker in Southeast Asia. So, taken together with Rizal's other writings, the Noli makes an important contribution to the understanding of a colonial society and of the workings of the Spanish Empire in the Philippines. The novel portrayed the lives and the characters of diverse positions from which the people in the 19th century Philippines thought and acted in relation to others. Many scholars interpreted the Noli as Rizal's diagnosis of the ills of colonial society as he assessed the role played by the church, the state, and the people. In the Noli, Rizal highlighted some of his ideas on how the Philippine society could be emancipated from the bondage of the colonial rule. He underscored the importance of education as the powerful tool to achieve progress. However, he also exposed the complexities and constraints wrought by colonial condition not only on the foreigners, but also on some misguided Filipinos that contributed to the ills of the society. So as Rizal exposed the vile realities of the context he wrote about, he also emphasized the good qualities of the Filipinos, which needed to be harnessed in order to succeed in the struggle for emancipation. So here's another controversial piece of information, that Noli Tangere was not inspired by Harriet Beecher Stowe, as contrary to the popular belief in all of the textbooks that circulated in the academe. So it's not Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, but by Benito Perez Galdós, Doña Perfecta, and Eugene Sue's The Wandering Jew. Here's the reason why. So here's the research made by Orion Perez Dumdum, posted the essay on his Facebook page last April 9, 2021, that according to him, pass the message is dangerous for historians. So this is Orion Perez Dumdum. So pass the message, or the message relay, is dangerous for historians. So as you can see here, you pass the message until the end the last person receives the fake news. The first person who receives the news, the one who is authentic, but unfortunately the last person who hears the news are the ones who hear the fake news. So here's the how. For example, Rizal wrote in his diary that The Wandering Jew was a great book, result of talent, of much thought. He taught the French language, but didn't speak to the heart, and it imposes, dominates, confuses, subjugates, but it does not make one cry. The second one said that Rizal said The Wandering Jew was a great book. In fact, it's even more influential than Uncle Tom's Cabin. The book affected him very deeply. Thought, though not enough to make him cry. It caused him to write what later became the Noli Tangere. So the third one says that Uncle Tom's Cabin affected Rizal very deeply, and it inspired him to write the Noli Tangere. And the fourth one say Uncle Tom's Cabin is Rizal's inspiration for writing Noli Tangere. So that's how the fake news has been circulated, not only during those times, but even with the authors of the Rizal book, Okay. So according to Carlos Quirino in his biographical book, The Great Malayan, he said that he interested in the Great Malayan, he interested a few of the less selfish members, but their enthusiasm lagged with the passage of time. The idea of writing a novel after the manner of Perez Galdós, Doña Perfecta, germinated within him. He read Eugene Sue's The Wandering Jew, but found that, although well written and conceived, it failed to move him deeply. Perhaps it's because I'm getting more hardened, he said to himself. He attempted to write a novel, but stopped after several pages. Finally, he hit an ironic style that suited his purpose of revealing the ignorance, cruelty, and greed of the Spaniards in the Philippines. This book was the Noli Tangere. So that's according to Carlos Quirino. And moreover, Rizal bought the book The Wandering Jew, and he recorded it in his diary on January 6, 1884. And he bought that for 10 pesetas. So according to Orion Perez Dumdum, he said that it is so ironic that what is now getting exposed to be fake news about Uncle Tom's Cabin's influence on Noli Tangere is really looking like a result of mishearing or misreading something from someone else who also misread, and perhaps putting too much importance on one innocent diary entry. So Rizal writes in his diary, number 1, that he thinks The Wandering Jew is a great read, the product of talent and a lot of thought on the part of Eugene Sue. And number 2, Rizal then adds that he finds the French as a sweet language of Lamartine, do not speak to the heart, and host of other attributes about how it imposes, dominates, confuses, and subjugates, but it does not make one cry. And according to Austin Craig, in this picture, this is Austin Craig, unfortunately misreads the entry about the French language in Rizal's diary and thinks to himself, aha, The Wandering Jew is a book that totally affected Rizal. It affected him deeply, but somehow it didn't make him cry. Then again, this must be the book that inspired him to write the Noli Me Tangere. But in number 4, Austin Craig includes in his 1913 book his personal speculation that The Wandering Jew captivated him so much that it caused Rizal to want to write something that later on became the Noli Me Tangere. In that account, Craig also adds to say that The Wandering Jew was much more earth-shaking and much more influential to society at that time than Uncle Tom's Cabin was. However, Charles Edward Russell reads Austin Craig's 1913 book and unfortunately misreads the part where Craig said that The Wandering Jew was much more influential than Uncle Tom's Cabin. The next sentence, written by Austin Craig, mistakenly says, based on his misreading of Rizal's diary, that the book, referring to The Wandering Jew, affected him powerfully. Not to tears, but with tremendous sympathy for the unfortunates that made him willing to risk everything in their behalf. Next one is this, that Charles Edward Russell, not realizing that Austin Craig was referring to The Wandering Jew, instead thinks Craig was referring to Uncle Tom's Cabin, wrote in 1924 book, co-authored with E.B. Rodriguez, that Rizal was influenced deeply by Uncle Tom's Cabin. But however, Gregorio Saidi reads Russell's account and then incorporates that Uncle Tom's Cabin error into his biography of Rizal, in which his biography of Rizal has become the textbook of Jose Rizal for all colleges in all universities and schools in the Philippines. Moreover, Sonia Saidi, the daughter of Gregorio Saidi, continues her father's error about Uncle Tom's Cabin, something that had hitherto been rare and obscure, and popularizes it further in the early 2000s, so that it has now become the mainstream among the millennials and the younger. Even if it is without a doubt in my mind that Jose Rizal appropriated the general character and the plot template of Benito Perez Galdós' Doña Perfecta and used it to create a Philippine version of Doña Perfecta when he came up with the Noli Me Tangere. And according to Orion Perez Dumdum, that I still think Jose Rizal is the greatest intellectual within the pantheon of the Filipino heroes. Why? So he continued, Orion Perez Dumdum continued that because he was pushing for something that was extremely relevant, which remains extremely relevant to this day. He was pushing for reforms leading to the modernization of the Philippines through the adoption of the Age of Enlightenment, which is also At that time, it was happening in Europe and ushered the Industrial Revolution and the rejection of the backwardness, superstition, ignorance, and even dogma or dogmatism, particularly of the friars. It becomes extremely clear that this was Rizal's primary aim in writing Noli Tangere because the source material, Doña Perfecta and its author Galdos, had a similar aim of bringing scientific rationalism, the Enlightenment, and the modernity found in more advanced Western European countries like France, Britain, Germany, over to Spain, which was considered to be relatively backward and held back by the traditionalist dogma or dogmatism. So let's move to the next one, which is the Noli Tangere and its relevance to independence and modern society today. Again, it was not independence from Spain that Rizal was fighting for. Rizal and his fellow Ilustrados who were with him in Europe wanted to bring to the Philippines all the great new stuff they saw, learn, and experience the Belle Epoque, Western Europe of the 1880s and onwards. And the reason Rizal is exalted above Bonifacio is because Bonifacio was inspired by Rizal's work. Bonifacio came across Rizal's work and in essence jumped the gun, and got a little ahead of himself in pushing for something that Rizal felt to be rather premature. Okay, so number 4. Incidentally, Rizal himself warned about such impatience in jumping the gun, or how a reformist agenda could be erroneously distorted into a pro-independence revolutionary one in the Noli Tangere itself, and most especially in his sequel, the El Filibusterismo. Rizal would have agreed with independence if he felt that we were ready for it, but it is obvious that he did not, and his fellow Ilustrados generally agreed with him that as a society we were still raw or hilaw, half-baked, and still in need of further tutelage or further education. That's why education is the root, or that is the key towards emancipation and independence for Jose Rizal, not revolution, not a bloody revolution, not even war. It is not even a question of whether we could win in an uprising or a war with the Spaniards. The question in the minds of Rizal and the Ilustrados was, in the event that we do win and gain independence, will we able to properly govern ourselves? That's the problem there. That's the question. Okay, number 7. The events during the Philippine-American War with Antonio Luna was killed by fellow Filipinos, along with the other cases of infighting within the Filipino forces, showed that the fears of Rizal and the Ilustrados were not unfounded. So that's why it was real. And number 8, looking at what's happening today, were the most fundamental reforms that we need to do in order to ensure that our people have enough jobs, where we will no longer need to be so dependent on becoming OFWs, working in the low-wage jobs abroad, and that the only overseas workers would hopefully to be just a high-wage expatriates who voluntarily go abroad to further their careers, while all others can live decent lives with their families while working in the Philippines. Cannot even happen, no? And look at how there's so much infighting that goes on, with some groups were supposed to be on the same side end up sabotaging other groups just because of some slight misunderstanding or a minor difference regarding the minutiae. Simple reforms that needed to be done long ago are repeatedly blocked by the modern-day Damasos, or Innocentius if you want to refer to Galdo's novel, the Doña Perfecta. Just like the bishop, Broderick Pabilio. And at the end result is that we continue to suffer from a pathetically dysfunctional set of systems. So Rizal was right that we sadly were not ready back then, and unfortunately it seems that until today we still are not. Okay, so that's all for this chapter on Noli Tangere, Rizal's Noli Tangere. No? Stay tuned for the next topic on El Filibusterismo, as well as the end or the last chapter of Rizal's life, which is his trial, the mock trial, as well as his execution in Luneta. So stay tuned, abangan. So that's all. Thank you very much. God bless you all.